It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.
Did you know? School Sport Victoria offers 650,000 sporting opportunities in 31 different sports at 10,700 events across the state every single year. That's a lot of kids playing sport. And for over 25 years, the Victorian School Sports Awards have recognised more than 1,500 students, teachers and volunteers for excellence and outstanding contribution to school sport. Now that's a champion effort.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Ask SSV show, and I'm joined here by the very lovely Josh Simmonds. How are you, mate?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Good, thank you. You're beaming to us from sunny Victoria. It's a beautiful day today, and we're just thankful that you've been able to give us some time to join us today. How has it been just in your little time of being back?
Yeah, it's been really good. I've been enjoying a bit of a break, or well in a break, and taking a bit of time away from the pitch, but refreshing physically, but also refreshing mentally, and enjoying some time with family and friends, which is long overdue.
Certainly is. Now we're talking to Josh Simmonds. Josh Simmonds is a Olympic silver medalist for the Kookaburras, plays some extremely well elite hockey, and you have just come back from the Tokyo Olympics, which is pretty amazing in itself. How was it just being part of that? Before we get into the whole how you started, but how was it just being part of the buzz?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's my first Olympics, so I had nothing to benchmark against a non-COVID Olympics or a COVID Olympics. So for me, it was all normal. But yeah, it was pretty incredible. The village situation. It's obviously its own little city within a city, but the buzz and electricity of the village is like nothing else. You walk around and you're seeing NBA players that you watch on TV and all these famous people. So there's definitely a lot of pinch myself moments in the village, that's for sure.
Now, given this is your first Olympics, which we'll talk about in a second, but you came through the Team Vic pathway for hockey in particular and some other sports as well. Just tell us about where it all started for you. Like, how was school sport? How did school sport play a factor in you becoming who you are?
Yeah, so I used to do athletics. Athletics was my first, I guess, sport I did, like, competitively, and did a lot of like school sport competitions. I was a middle distance and cross country runner, so did a lot of state cross country stuff for back then Team Vic and then eventually School Sport Victoria. But I guess I loved sport as a kid, and then got into hockey finally through my school, Yarra Valley Grammar. They just ran a little afternoon hockey competition. Loved that, and then went on from there. And actually, in my second year, I was in the Team Vic under-12 side, so that was my first state team for any sport. Got to wear the old jacket and tracksuit pants, which I've still got. The old Team Vic ones. I think I've still got a pair of ankle socks that say Team Vic on them. That was kind of something every kid at school wanted back then.
Certainly was. And I mean, it's nice that you've still got the uniform and all of that. What made you change from doing track and field athletics to hockey?
I guess I think I stopped doing athletics at about maybe 14, 15. Hockey eventually just became what I really, really enjoyed. And the timings of the trainings when I started making some state teams for hockey kind of clashed with little athletics on Saturday mornings, but also training. And I probably stopped enjoying like the individual running of athletics a couple of years before then, but really, really loved relays. And that's kind of what kept me around. And I guess the team aspect of hockey kind of drew me there, and I had friends I still have today in hockey, and I guess the enjoyment factor drew me away.
And I think the enjoyment factor is very important. Obviously, I guess you're talking about the enjoyment factor of what it's like being part of a team.
Yeah,
in
definitely.
terms of relays, but also in a hockey team now. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that I've always been drawn to. I in my later years at school started playing volleyball, and the whole team aspect of that was great. Probably one of my favorite sports to play is volleyball today still. The team aspect's kind of a group of people, trying to achieve a common goal and little cliques in teams and all that kind of stuff. I love that kind of factor about it.
Oh, very good. Now tell us what schools you went to, primary school, high school, what school you went to?
Pretty boring. I only went to one school. So I was at Yarra Valley Grammar all the way through primary school. I'm literally looking at Yarra Valley Grammar outside my window. So we're really close there. So I was pretty fortunate enough to, be at the one school all the way through, and the transition from primary school to senior school was pretty seamless.
I mean, you say boring, but let's face it, that's pretty stable as well. There's a pretty amazing, it's a rare story for a young man or a young woman to go from prep to 12 in the same school. You would have been around the same friends, the same teachers, the same area. That brings a lot of stability as well. Would you agree? Yeah,
definitely. And I was doing a podcast for Yarra the other day, and they were talking about teachers and stuff who I'm still in contact with. And even throughout the whole Olympic period, I had my, grade 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teachers just commenting on Facebook and all that kind of stuff, sending me messages. And so the community aspect of being with a school for, 13 years in the end, flows through. I've been out of school nearly 8 years now, so that's still going on.
Very good, and a big shout out. I don't know if he's watching. You call him Mr. Joy, Paul Joy. He's a fantastic chaplain out there, been there for a long time. I think we tried to calculate off air that it's probably close to 100 years that he's been out there. He's a pretty amazing man.
Yeah.
We've already got questions coming in. I mean, I know you can't see them, so I'll manage them. And I've got some questions that have already been pre-submitted, but this is a really interesting question that's coming in from Ebony Cummings. And was this your first Olympics? But it was your first Olympics. Talk us through the moment in time when you thought, I would really like to make the Olympics one day. How old were you, and that kind of dream? When did that come alive?
Yeah, I think I think probably it was a lofty goal, as every kid wants to, play for Australia and make the Olympics. And the reality is that not many kids get to do that. But I think when I really, really wanted to go to the Olympics, I was probably probably a bit later, probably about 12 years old. And when I watched my first Australian hockey game. Then we had a guy at our club called Russell Ford, who still plays for Doncaster, and he was in the national program at that stage. And he was kind of a bit of an idol of mine. And saw the Kookaburras play live for the first time, and I thought, this is pretty sweet. I'd love to, I love my job to play hockey. And I guess, the pinnacle of our sport is the Olympics. So it kind of goes hand in hand to play for Australia, but want to go represent your country at an Olympics.
I mean, that's nice to have a dream like that. But like at 12 years old, to the moment when you got into the Olympics, when your name was announced and you got the phone call or the email or whatever, where were you and how did you react?
Yeah, so I probably shifted a few years ago when I made the national squad. That kind of like dream became a goal, and we were in the Tokyo cycle. So everything led up to, I think it was the 11th of June on Friday. The team or the squad had elected to get an email bang on 10 a.m. And you could elect to get a phone call if you wanted to from Colin, our coach, but I just said, give me the email. I'll rip the Band-Aid off kind of thing. And I was in Perth. Unfortunately, my partner, Chloe, wasn't able to come over because of borders and mum and dad. So I was on FaceTime with Chloe. She just drove down the road from her work to be by my side, and we opened it at the same time and scrolled. It's in alphabetical order, so I scrolled straight down to Simmonds. I think I'm third from the bottom or something like that, was over the moon with extreme excitement and excitement and relief that I had to have a lot of sacrifices over the last 4 years to achieve that, but also many sacrifices years before then was culminating to that point.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about sacrifice in a second, but if you had to rewind back to 12 years old, when that moment when you thought, I'd really like to make an Olympic team, what would you say to your 12-year-old self now? What advice would you give to that 12-year-old boy that hopefully other 12-year-old boys and girls are listening and get some advice from you?
I think it's cliche, but it's don't sweat the small things kind of message, is that it's such a long journey and many things happen. For me, that's a nearly 14-year journey. A lot of things happen in 14 years, and you miss out on teams, you get injured, you think, oh, this sport isn't for me, and then the next day you wake up and you're back in love with it and all that kind of stuff. There's many highs and lows, but as long as you're just trajecting up, that's the main thing. But I would say that it's a long journey and enjoy as much as possible. I know a lot of people say, you have to enjoy it and have fun, and that's a really overused cliche, but it's so important because you can't strive to make something for 14 years and hate it every single day. You need to enjoy what you're doing, and when you're enjoying what you're doing and you're having fun with your friends, your performance follows.
That's very true. Now, you said something interesting just in that answer, where you need to fall in love with it. Was there a moment when, from 12 to you've just given your age away, 26, but in 14 years, was there a moment when you didn't love it, and then there's moments where you did love it? Talk us through some of those. Yeah,
for sure. I think I loved it all throughout my junior stuff when I was balancing school and all that kind of stuff. But when I probably came out of school in 2014 was my first year out. Probably 2014 to 18, when I finally made the Kookaburra squad, was kind of a transition from, playing state hockey to playing national hockey at a junior level to then trying to play national hockey at the, ultimate senior level. And there was not much else going on there for me other than that kind of focus goal. So sometimes it just became a little bit too much if I was, not progressing the way I wanted to. And I wouldn't say I fell out of love with it or, started not enjoying it. But there was definitely times where it became a little bit of a chore, and that still happens today. If I'm pretty fatigued from the last year and a half, 18 months, I'm not ready to go out and start playing hockey again. I need at least a month off or something like that. So that refreshing mentally, I think, is so much more important than refreshing physically, and that's kind of the point.
Because we've talked about this a bit before, where we watch you on the big screen, and we'll talk about that in a second. It was exciting. I watched every game. I watched every game of the Hockey Roos. I watched every game of the Kookaburras, and I think Australia, as we've talked about on the phone, I think you're a bit shocked at the metrics in terms of broadcast metrics, because you guys were really watched, and we rode the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
But when we see you on the screen, we forget that actually you had to go through hard times, you had to go through injury. But you've also mentioned something interesting in terms of the mental aspect, the part that we can see when there's a physical injury. If you're in crutches, we know there's a physical injury, but how do you rejuvenate the mental side, and how much part does the mental side play in you enjoying your sport?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think it's unquestionably, I reckon, the most important part of it, and I think that's where some kids can get burnt out, is not physically but mentally. I think for me, I've always been naturally fit enough, and I feel like when I'm on a break, and I've learnt this the hard way, and probably learnt it around those ages I was talking about before, but now I kind of get to a point where I'm on a break, and I think, oh yeah, I'm kind of itching physically to get back into it, and I'll say to myself, no, just give it another week, or give it another few days, and a few days of missing physical training isn't going to be detrimental to you, but going back 3 or 4 days early and not mentally being there is going to be really, really detrimental to you a year down the track, when you haven't had a break and you're thinking, oh God, how am I going to wake up tomorrow to go to training? And then your level suffers. And I think it's kind of like exaggerated and brought to the front a lot in a high performance centralized training program like we have in Perth, where you need to have those mental breaks, and you need to have those mental escapes, and have something outside hockey rather than just hockey, because you can't do it. No one can.
I'd imagine that would be hard too, being away from family, being away from your girlfriend, because I think your girlfriend lives here. Is that right?
Yeah, Chloe lives here. Yeah.
And you've just talked about the fact you've gone from prep to year 12 in the same school, so you probably have a whole bunch of friends in that school. And being semi-isolated, like I'm originally from Perth. Originally, I moved over here in '94. But Perth is a bit of a different one in that it's a different time zone, and you can feel isolated when you're over there. How much does that play in terms of your enjoyment of the sport and staying motivated?
Yeah, it's definitely hard when you're injured or you miss out on a team, especially with COVID, and borders mean that people can't come visit you, or you can't duck back home. So I think for me, it's kind of like a bit of an attitude of just rolling with the punches, and if that happens, you've just kind of got to get on with it. And for me, I kind of it can be difficult at times, not having family around, not having my partner around, but I know I back myself to with all my training, and that I'm eventually going to break through that kind of lull. But I think if I map out those mental breaks well enough, like I was talking about before, when those times hit, I'm able to be mentally refreshed to go back to training when the time's right, and hit the ground running, and increase my level and my performance and all that kind of stuff, so that I don't have to miss those teams, and I don't have to be away from family in hard times and injuries and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's nice that you're here at the moment, and I'm sure your mum Rochelle and Craig, Dad, are loving having you around. Especially to do the dishes and stuff like that, the chores that you have to do. That's it.
Tell me, if you look back on all the achievements you've had, is there one that sticks out for you? Is there an achievement that you go, I look back on that and go, that was a really sweet victory?
Yeah, I think obviously the Olympic silver, but that kind of hasn't sunk in. That's kind of fresh. So if I look before the Olympics, my other major victory was Pro League. So Pro League is kind of like our home and away international series, I guess. So you travel around the world playing countries, and it's kind of like a World Cup in a way that's not like a tournament, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. And we won that we were in Holland or in the Netherlands in 2019 and beat Belgium in the final 3-2.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my first big victory as a Kookaburra, because I was only my second year in the program. So that's probably one I'm most proud of. Other ones I'm pretty proud of, even though it's only it's not at an international level. Victoria, we had a pretty good under 21s age group. Won 2 national titles with under 21s and a couple national titles with Vikings, which is the open age side, and they're as special victories as international ones for me.
And you just talked about the medal, and we get that question a lot in the question submissions. Just show us the medal for us, because we'd love to see it.
Yep. So
great looking medal.
This is it. So it's pretty big medal, and it's got the writing on the top, if you guys can see that, like the Olympiad. And then it's got hockey men on the bottom, and then just the normal ribbon. But yeah, there's a bit of weight to it, and it's a big bulky medal. So I guess Olympic medals are hard to win, so they should be pretty special and extraordinary.
Yeah, it would be, and it's amazing that you got that achievement, because I guess back when you were 12, it's every kid's dream to make an Olympics, but over and above that, the bonus is you've come home with a silver medal, which is phenomenal in itself. What was it like at the moment when you got the medal? What was that like? Just talk us through some of that, because that would have been bittersweet, I'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it happened pretty quick, so it was pretty devastating when we unfortunately lost, and the circumstances with the shootout and that kind of situation there makes it. That's a really, 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 really bad way to lose. Unfortunately, it's a good way to win, but obviously the other end of the spectrum. And then we had to get dressed ready to go for the medal ceremony in about 10 minutes. So that was kind of like a real tough mental thing to go through, that you were bitterly disappointed and everyone was pretty upset about it, and then suddenly you had to front up. So it was a bit of a numb feeling on the podium, to be honest. I remember exactly how it was, and it was a bit difficult looking to my left and seeing all the Belgian players, and obviously they had different reactions to us, but we're a pretty tight-knit team, and it kind of showed when we presented each other with our medals rather than just putting it over your neck, and that was kind of a bit of a cultural thing for us. And I think that's where it probably sunk in a little bit for me there, is that we were in this together and we did achieve something pretty amazing. I know we went to that tournament to win a gold medal, and it might feel like a little bit of a failure, but to win an Olympic silver medal is extremely rare, obviously. So it's something that I think I'll look back on in a handful of years, look at it and go, well, that's quite incredible. I know gold would have been better, but I'd definitely take a silver medal over a bronze medal.
Very good. Yes, that's true. A silver medal over a bronze medal.
Yeah.
How do you think the silver medal has shaped you in terms of moving forward? Has it had an impact on you moving forward?
Yeah, I think when I got selected for the Olympics and then made it, obviously when I got selected for the Olympics, I thought, I'm going to be Olympian, but there was still 6 weeks to go to the Olympics, so anything could have happened. So I guess when the first whistle went and I was, playing that first game, well, now I'm an Olympian. That's kind of where I was like, well, this is going to be with me for the rest of my life. But then to put, Olympic medalists on top of that is something that, I'm, pretty proud of, and family's really proud of. And I guess it kind of really sunk in when me and a guy called Dylan were traveling home. The rest of the squad went to Perth to do their hotel quarantine, and we went through to Melbourne, and we're in Singapore, and this random American bloke just came up to us, and we had our uniform. He's like, "You've been to the Olympics?" Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, that's awesome." And we got chatting with him for 5 minutes, and then he goes, "Oh, how did you go?" And I was like, "Well, we won silver." And he was, amazed, wanted to see the medal. I thought it was, the most incredible thing. And me and Dylan were obviously a bit flat, being like, well, yeah, it's not gold, blah, blah, blah. But there was just this random guy that thought it was the most incredible thing he'd ever seen. And that's kind of where I was like, well, it is pretty amazing, I guess, to have an Olympic medal that not many people get to touch or have.
Well, that's exactly right. And I guess it's hard because as elite athletes, you do have very high expectations on yourself. And
Yeah.
if you came away super excited that you'd not got the gold, there'd be an issue with that. But
Yeah.
the other side of the coin, or the balancing act, is being happy with your achievement of silver, but also being hungry enough to go for a gold again. Because I don't want to gloss over the fact that what I think the average commoner like myself fail to understand is that because Tokyo was postponed a year, you had to stay motivated, not for 1 year, but for 2 years. So in fact, for 5 years, if we look at it all together. So how did you stay motivated and keep driving yourself with the pending announcement of postponement, and then it got postponed for another year? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the reason having a good break now is because that mental break is because it went on for so long. I think once I got into the Olympic year and went back to Perth at the start of this year, in Jan, Feb, it was all systems go, and I was, mentally refreshed, and, it was the Olympics, so you can suck it up for a few months and get on with it because this is the biggest, stage there is. But yeah, it definitely took its toll a little bit last year when we found out the postponement, and our hockey program in Perth just shut down for many months, and we all went back to our home states or wherever we kind of wanted to. And that drew on. I kind of started working for a family business there, so that was a good escape from hockey, and I think that really, really helped me. But I kind of put it down to is that I kind of owed it to myself and also family and Chloe and that kind of stuff as well, is that I moved over in 2018 to try and achieve this goal, is that I need to put it all out there and continue on to it, because I don't want to look back in when I'm 40 and say, well, I was a little bit homesick and I didn't really, put everything into it, and I kind of went a little bit half with it, and in the end I regretted it and I didn't make it. I prefer to look back and say, well, I fully went into it trying to make it. And if I didn't make it, well, then I did everything I could. And if I did make it and had success at the tournament, that was because I trained really hard and I made lots of sacrifices and choices, and in the end achieved that goal. So that kind of motivated me to not necessarily not let down those people, but make the sacrifices and choices that we had to endure worth it.
I'd imagine that would be hard. So just talk us through some of those sacrifices. Like, if I was to ask you, what sacrifices have you had to make for you to get to where you are today? What would you say to that?
I couldn't really list them, but I guess time away from family and friends has been pretty tough. Moving across the other side of the country, miss out on work opportunities, all that kind of stuff. I met my niece Miller for the first time last week, and she's 12 weeks old now, so missed that kind of situation with Caitlin and Rob, my sister Caitlin and brother-in-law Rob. So that was a little bit tricky at times. So yeah, there's many lists, but when I look back on it, if I had to do it again and I was able to go to the Olympics, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Wow,
that's
very cool to hear.
That was the whole idea of it. If I had moved over at the start of 2018 and then finally made the Olympics and looked back after that and said, well, I probably should have stayed home, this isn't that great, well, then that would have been pretty silly. So I guess getting to that point in the end and realizing that it was all worth it is really, really sweet for me.
I mean, it's pretty amazing that you do what you do, and the ideal world, I'm imagining, I don't want to put words in your mouth, the ideal world would be to have the Hockeyroos elite program to be in Melbourne, because then you've got the best of both worlds. But because there are actually some other Melbourne males and females, like Rachel Lynch is from Melbourne, Sophie's from Melbourne, Amy's from Melbourne. So to move over to Perth is I've done it the other way. It's a big deal. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So being over there is great, but being here is great as well. We've had a question come in as well. Do your parents support you? Now, you've got some pretty amazing parents, if I do say so myself. They've been pretty supportive of you. Tell us, how have they supported you in the 14 years of you, wanting to be an Olympian?
Yeah, obviously it goes without saying. I think the majority of people that make it to the Olympics have support from parents or like a parent figure in their life. So I think their support has been invaluable. Like, you know, it goes without saying, junior state teams and national tournaments and stuff at a young age, they cost money and to send you away to that. So it's not just the emotional support, the financial support that they've given's been pretty amazing. I think in that kind of transition period, going from junior national hockey to trying to get into the senior side, your parents kind of go from a point of having all the answers and being, you know, a sounding, you know, you stop kind of asking your mum and dad, how do I do that? Because you're transitioning into a senior program. So they were always just sounding boards for me, always supported me whenever I had problems, not necessarily with the answers, but would help me find a solution rather than giving me a solution, which I think is what parents do when you're, you know, 10 or 11 or 15 years old or whatever it is, but they can't do that when you're 23 years old trying to break into a elite program like the Kookaburra. So I think that was a really, really good transition and really good thing for me to have mum and dad supporting me in that way. But even when I've been over in Perth, they're always only a phone call away. And that's been so important this year because obviously with the borders, they saw them once before I came home. So, and that was only quickly in New Zealand. So that was a little bit tough on mum and dad and tough on me as well. But yeah, the support they gave me this year was probably the most important support they've given me over that 14-year period.
Yeah, because we did a little interview with them, a little podcast that we did with them, and Craig and Rochelle were talking about the fact that they'd actually been to, they couldn't remember a time when they hadn't been to one of your games, international or national or a state. But in the last 12 months, that's definitely the case. Like they've missed out. They've had to watch it on the big screen. How was it playing to empty stadiums in Tokyo? Because I'd imagine the crowd would energize you as a player and as a team. How was that playing to empty stadiums?
Yeah, it's funny. I've got that question a fair bit. I actually didn't affect us that much, and the reason being is because we'd had no international matches for 18 months before then.
Yeah,
we had 6 against New Zealand, but we normally would have had maybe 30 in that time. So it was barely anything. All our kind of international standard matches were against ourselves at 6:30 in the morning at Perth Hockey Stadium when there's no one awake, let alone anyone in the stands. So I was quite used to playing international standard hockey in front of empty stadiums with no noise and you can hear everything. So it didn't throw me off that much. It probably felt a little bit weird playing such a big game as the quarterfinal, semi-final and final, because normally at a tournament, even if it's not the host nation playing those games, those pointy ends of the tournament matches are normally packed stadiums. So that probably felt a little bit weird, but there was advantages in, and we kind of just rolled with it and saw the advantages there. So you could hear everyone talking, you know, as I'm a defender, so I talk to my midfielders to who they have to mark and all that kind of stuff. They could hear me clear as day because there's no other crowd noise, but also you can hear what the other team's saying as well. So obviously that works both ways, but you can hear if they're calling for the ball, or you can hear if they're calling out different presses, all that kind of, you know, tactical stuff. Is that it actually kind of probably helped us play at a little bit of a better level.
I mean, yeah, it would be interesting and just have a different sort of setup when you're playing to an empty stadium. But interesting, I hadn't thought about that you're actually used to it in terms of playing at different times in Perth and all of that. So
I think it probably would have been funny for the European teams. They just came off a European Championship, so they were playing in front of them, and the COVID measures over there aren't as tight as what we have here. So they were, you know, had thousands of people. So it might have been a little bit tricky for them coming across to Tokyo, but we just kind of had to see an advantage where we could and just kind of roll with it. Couldn't dwell on that, or else it's just an external factor to distract you. Had to get on with it.
Yeah, I'll bet. Now, talk us through the village. You're in the village and you're staying as in the Australian part of the village. What was it like? What was the food like? What was the connection with other players and other teams like?
Yeah, so our we had like a AOC hotel, and I'm sure the other people we had on have spoken about this. Like it was a really tight knit community there because you could go out and walk anywhere around the village, go to the dining hall, souvenir shop, anything like that, but you weren't interacting with other countries because we didn't, at least it wasn't really safe to do so because you knew they were putting all the COVID measures in place. But the problem was if you tested positive for COVID, you were out. There was no questions asked, so you didn't really want to risk it. So to kind of mitigate that boredom factor, the Australian Olympic Committee tower, we had all these big TV screens outside where you could watch all the sports happening, and a lot of the Australian team was there for Peter Ball's 800 and all those Titmus swimming and all that kind of big events. That was packed out the front, everyone cheering and that. So that was kind of a really cool atmosphere to be part of. But then when you came back from playing your match or doing your event, everyone was there and everyone had been watching, so they congratulate you or comment on the game. So that was pretty cool coming back and being like, oh, I saw you do this or whatever it is, because everyone was there outside watching, just live breathing the Olympics. The food hall was pretty cool. It had like different countries' cuisines, and I'm a bit of a plain eater, so there was like a section called World, which had your normal, meat and mash and veggies kind of food. So I kind of stuck to that one. But they had goizes at the Japanese thing, which is probably the most popular food in the whole village. The lines were back to back there, so I can't even imagine how many goizes they would have gone through. Tens of thousands, probably.
Well, we've had the question come in from Louisa, and actually Ava has asked the same question there from St. Leo's the Great. They talked about what food do you think and what food do you eat that gives you the most energy for training? So is there a food routine that you have before you go out and play or before you go out and train?
I don't have like a set thing I eat before a game. I have seen people actually do that and get caught out a little bit when we travel around the world, because you're not always going to get that food. Yeah. Like if you're having, for example, like, I don't know, if it was like eggs on toast, something simple like that, you might think you're able to get that everywhere. But we go to Holland and they have all this weird bread and all that kind of stuff. Like you can't always get what you want. So I'm pretty chilled out with what I want to eat. But this year I was really, really tight, didn't have any junk food, kind of like was really stringent on what I was eating, and ate a lot of like salmon and a lot of fish and just general like seafood groups. So that really, really helped me with my energy levels and body composition and that kind of stuff this year a lot.
Yeah, because I'd imagine, like you've just talked about, that not every food is available in all parts of the country, especially around Tokyo, where there would have been some pretty heavy, like you couldn't leave the village, right? So
normally we were stuck in the village. Yeah.
And normally as athletes, you enjoy when you got some time off to go sightseeing, but there is no way known that you would have been out. First of all, you probably didn't want to be out because COVID was pretty rampant out there, but more so, you weren't allowed to go out. So there was some restrictions around you going.
Yeah, we were pretty, we weren't restricted in where we could move within the village, like I said, but you would probably want it to be a little bit more restricted. But yeah, it was very much from the AOC hotel to the dining hall back. You never like stuck in your room and stayed in your room. But yeah, you were kind of around the Australian area. But it was a pretty good area, like looked out over Tokyo Bay, and where you see all the, photos everyone's getting in front of the Olympic rings, and there's that little grass area behind. We were pretty much looking out over that area. So it was a pretty nice part of the village.
Brilliant. Well, we've got this question that's come in here from Ivan, and Ivan's asked this question: comparing the Australian development pathways to Europe, what improvements can Australia make? Now, obviously, this is your opinion, and you can't rewrite some of the pathways. But if you had to say what would be some things that could improve on, what would you say?
That's a pretty good question. Tricky one. I think, the pathways. I reckon, the pathways in Australia, I don't exactly know how they compare to the European pathways. Being Europe, I think with Europe being so close and you're able to travel, the countries are so close together, you can you can drive to training, or whereas and do like your squad trainings. Whereas with Australia, you can't kind of like centralize a lot with those athlete tournaments or squad training programs a lot. Whereas in Europe, I know they train with their clubs on Mondays and Wednesdays or whatever, and then they go do their national junior stuff on Friday. In Australia, you don't have that luxury because you can't fly across the other side of the country at will. But I think Australia's pathway is kind of hinged a lot on the NTC programs and our national training centres. So that's like BIS and QAS and NSWIS. And before you're in the national program, that's where all your development happens. But the development in terms of like what you're learning and what you're being taught is constant. It is exactly the same as what the senior Hockeyroos and Kookaburra squads are learning. So when you come to the national program, if you're fortunate enough to progress to there, you're playing the exact same styles you were as an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, and eventually when you make it. So I think the program in Australia works pretty well.
Well, very good, very good. We've got Delina who's actually joined us, and she's from St James. I don't know which St James she's at, but she's at a St James school somewhere. What suburb are you in, Delina?
I'm in Hoppers Crossing.
Nice. Now, do you like sport yourself?
Yeah, I play basketball.
Good work. Did you watch any of the Kookaburra's games?
Somewhat.
Very good.
Very good. Now, what's your question for Josh?
My question is, when did you find out you were going to the Olympics?
Yep. So I found out June 11th. So it was about, what was that in the end? That was about a month before we left. So yeah, as I said before, we just got an email that told us we were going to the Olympics. Just had our 16 or our 18 playing squad notified there. Was on, my family and partner weren't able to be with me, so I was on FaceTime with them. And yeah, lots of excitement came afterwards. The group of us that actually made the team had to go to training probably about an hour later because we had a weekend off, and our loads and stuff kind of meant that we had to do a little bit of a running session on that Friday. So I guess the excitement of the group going to that session, we were kind of interacting with each other, and it was a really, really good and cheerful kind of group to be part of, obviously. And then the following week on the Monday, a few days after, we had the big Olympic announcement at the gym where they do all the photos and the official media stuff. So it was kind of a whirlwind of a weekend. With unbelievable feeling. Can still remember scrolling down and finding my name.
That's great. Do you have any other questions, Delina, that you want to ask while you're here?
I also have
you sent one in about the friendships.
Oh yeah. Did you make any friends from other countries?
Yeah, so we kind of know didn't have as much interaction with non-hockey players from other countries because you had to be a little bit careful in the village with interacting with other countries with COVID. So we got tested for coronavirus every single day. And if you tested positive, it kind of, you were out of the Olympics, but also all your close contacts had to be isolated and stuff. So we were kind of careful with who we were interacting with, but all the other hockey nations, we know those guys personally and interact with them after games or after the tournament was finished and that kind of stuff. So a lot of the guys, about 4 guys from our team are currently in the Netherlands playing in the club season there. So they'll be playing with a lot of the European guys that we played with in their club system over there. So, yeah.
Okay.
There's some great questions, Delina. Where do you hope to take your sport one day, your basketball?
I'm not really sure. Maybe when I'm good enough, maybe like the NBA or Olympics. I don't know.
Awesome.
Nice. What's your favorite position in basketball?
Defense.
Good work.
Very good. That's
Thanks,
like my defender.
Thanks heaps for joining us, Delina. hope you can join us in future shows.
Yeah.
Thanks, Belina.
Bye.
Always nice to have your fan base join us. Now, we've had this question come in from Kirsten. Is it Kirsten or Kristen? Kirsten. So Kirsten's asked, have you had any major injury setbacks? Great question.
Yep, definitely had my fair share of injuries. I guess I've had the odd little soft tissue one there, but not a whole lot, not a whole lot of like your stereotypical hammies or quads or calves kind of soft tissue injuries. I've had surgery on my finger, so broke this finger here, so still got a big scar and still got metal work in there. Just got hit with a stick, but I think every single hockey player probably has a broken finger at some stage of their career. The other major injury I've had, it's a bit of a funny story. We were doing like plyometric hops. It's a bit silly, it's a bit embarrassing, but I was doing plyometric hops in the gym, probably on like a 20 centimeter, maybe even 10 centimeter hurdle. And as I was landing, I like tripped on the hurdle and rolled my ankle really, really badly. I was out for about 7-8 weeks with that. And that was one that it was really, really annoying because I couldn't really do much about it. And it wasn't a hockey injury. It wasn't like one of those injuries where I hadn't been doing gym properly and I went out and sprinted and did my hammy and it was probably, all my fault. It was kind of like one of those just random injuries that I couldn't do anything about. Missed a couple of tournaments because of it. And that kind of really hurt. And I still get teased about it today, not being able to jump over hurdles in the gym. So, yeah.
Well, I guess you've removed the hurdle routine from your training program. Would I be right there?
Don't hop over hurdles anymore. That's for sure. Apart from that, not many other injuries. I've actually been pretty lucky with them, and especially this year, didn't miss one session or 1 week or game or anything with injuries, which kind of worked out really, really well. And I think we only maybe had 2 guys in the squad this year that had not long term, but at least a 4-week injury or something like that. So we all did pretty well.
And that's a testament to the coaches and your management as well, because to manage that many men, to keep them going and not be injured that's actually remarkable. Actually, when I think about it, it's pretty hard to do.
Our strength and conditioning coach is unbelievable. So we're hooked up to GPSs. We've got a GPS vest and GPSs on every session that has our load management being modelled for 14 days or 28 days or as long as you want. And he'll often come up to you and say, and a lot of it isn't like you've done too much work. We need to tone you down for a couple of days. It might be, your 80% efforts or your sprinting hasn't quite hit that mark. You might be at risk of doing a soft tissue injury. Can you go do a 50-meter sprint for me or something like that? You'd be amazed at how much that helps you in your injury prevention down the track. And it's obviously helped the squad with having so few injuries.
It definitely would. Now, just talk us through what a typical week looks like for the Kookaburras.
Yep. So we always have Thursdays off, and most of the time we have Sundays off. Our hockey sessions are always Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. They vary in intensities. Sometimes it's a full-blown match play session where we're just playing intra matches, and we did a fair few of them this year because we obviously didn't have international games. And then we have gym on Monday and Wednesday, and sometimes we have a top-up if you want on a Friday after the hockey. We might have a little gym or injury prevention or a maintenance session or something like that. But yeah, I think our main block is that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Wednesday kind of is the big day. Then you have a refresher. Friday was mostly this year a match play session, and then Saturday would be whatever the coaches wanted you to do. But it's all mapped out, a month or so in advance that this is going to be a heavy week, or a lot of the time this year we did what we called heat weeks. So because Tokyo was going to be so hot, they kind of mapped out, around Feb and March. It was probably February. There was a week where we trained later in the day, and they took all our hydration and, took like samples of our salt or something like that in our sweat to work out your sweat rates and all that kind of thing. So all of that meant that those training weeks were a bit harder and, to simulate the conditions and that. So, yeah, a fair bit of training.
And for the team, the Kookaburras, to come away, and even the hockey group as well, to come away relatively injury-free.
Yep.
And to do what like I said, I'm not just saying this. I watched every game, and I watched every game of the hockey group. I couldn't believe it when there were some days you'd do a game following each other, 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And I'm like, how are they doing it? Because the temperatures were in excess of 35, 40. And I know Perth isn't a cool place because, like I said, I grew up there.
Yep.
How did you cope competing so often in such a short amount of time? Because that's pretty intense.
Yeah, so I guess that's it's funny you say that. Like, we were confident going into it, and probably the hardest part of the tournament was the pool stage. So we went 2 games on, 1 day off, 2 on, 1 day off, and then had our final pool game. But after that 4th pool game, if we were going to go all the way to the medal rounds, it was day on, day off, day on, day off. So it kind of got a little bit easier in terms of like an output from there. But before the tournament, if like I said, our GPS is mapped out, so we can look at it and say our 14-day load has been this many Ks and this many sprinting efforts and this many change of directions. In the Olympics, we didn't hit that point because games often have less distance than a training session. So we had full confidence going in that we'd already achieved that. We'd already achieved those kind of outputs and loads in the heat of Darwin. We did a few heat acclimation camps there, in the heat of Perth. But yeah, we had a WA Institute of Sport, I think it was like a physiologist or something like that did a lot of the lead up in terms of hydration strategies with us, and pre-cooling strategies, and half time changing your uniform so you're carrying less weight in the final stages of the game with your sweat, all that kind of stuff. So we were fully prepared that when we went into that first game, that you had full confidence that all your strategies and all your training before them had worked out. And I think probably the one game where I felt the heat the most was the quarterfinal against Holland. That was in the middle of the day, and nerves and all that kind of stuff make you a bit more fatigued. So I've probably felt the heat the most there, but all the other games were fine because we'd done that much training before and that much running in the heat that we were fully prepared for it.
Yeah. And was there a favourite team that you enjoyed playing against? One of the teams in particular that stands out?
I think I really enjoyed playing against India. So as a defender, kind of my job is to not let my opponent get the ball and kind of lock down that defensive circle. And the Indian strikers are really crafty and run around everywhere. So it's always a really tough day as a defender. And they kind of just do different things that your normal European strikers won't necessarily do. They hit a lot of balls into the circle, so you always have to be on your guard. And we, as a defensive unit, locked it down really well in that game. And we won, I think it was 7-1 in the end. So we had a really good performance at attack, but our defense was really sound there. So that was probably my favorite game of the tournament.
Yeah. Okay. And if you had to say a toughest moment, would it be losing the final, or is there another
toughest opponent to play, or toughest
moment for you, for Josh Simmonds? What was one of the toughest moments for you at the Olympics?
The semi-final and the final were the hardest matches for sure. The hardest opponents I played on, a guy called Florian Fuchs. He actually just recently announced his retirement. A German striker, hands down best striker I've ever played against. He has the characteristics of every nation's characteristics of a striker in one player. And so he was a real hand. He just happened to always be in a similar kind of position to me. So I just happened to be manning up on him a fair bit. So that was probably the most challenging opponent. But yeah, probably the most challenging game was that the Belgium final, which you would expect number 1 and 2 in the world playing in a final. So that was probably the toughest game. And then the toughest moment, obviously emotionally, was the shootout and losing in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough to watch, so I imagine it was tough to just be there. But I
Yeah.
tell you what, Channel 7 did an amazing job. I know you were on the receiving end of it, but I'm sure your parents will tell you they had so many streams going. There was one day where they had 44 streams going, so we could watch whatever we wanted in terms of the game. So it was brilliant. Let's look at what's the future hold for Josh Simmonds. What's the immediate future hold? And then fast forward 10 years from now, what would you like to have achieved in your little bucket of wish list of what you want to achieve?
Yeah, so I think for me, for like my hockey career is only on an international level is pretty young, and there's a lot to go. So I think with this Paris cycle only being 3 years away now, or by the time we have this kind of immediate break here, it's probably only about 2.5 years by the time we get back into it in January next year. So that's kind of the big goal. But within that 3 years, we have Commonwealth Games and a World Cup thrown in there as well. So it's all going to happen pretty fast. But yeah, I'd love to play hockey for Australia for as long as possible. And I think that'll be something that I'm in a good position to be able to do after kind of getting into the squad a little bit more, and definitely not cementing myself in that group, but I'm a bit more involved in the core kind of lineups rather than what I was when I first went into it. So that's something I definitely want to build on. And yeah, I really enjoy working in the family business and that kind of thing. So I want to kind of pursue that in the future. But yeah, I guess the immediate future right now is a bit of a break. We're meant to have our Hockey One tournament, which is our domestic national league, is meant to kick off right at the end of October. So fingers crossed that happens. We obviously don't know what's going to happen, but yeah.
And I guess that means you need to move back over to Perth. You have to quarantine when you go back to Perth as well.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I won't be going back to Perth this year because there's nothing on for us. So our contracts with Hockey Australia and all that kind of stuff, and our commitments with Hockey Australia ended this year in August. So we have no international games or anything like that. So everyone's on a bit of a downtime at the moment. So they'll select next year's squad in around December, maybe end of December, and then there'll be an induction for the 2022 squad.
Brilliant stuff. Well, we've loved having you on the show. And look, for anyone who's watching this now or in replay later on, make sure you do follow Josh on Instagram. He's definitely worth connecting with on Instagram. And we're going to continue to champion you, Josh. Look, it is your first Olympics. I have a sneaking suspicion it's not going to be your last, and it's not going to be your last World Championship. We look forward to continuing to champion you both on the court or on the field and off the field. But congratulations on your silver medal. But I'm going to guess that Dad's going to have to put up a big medal bar because you're going to get a few more of these yet.
Hopefully. That's the idea. Hopefully.
Good job. Well, thanks heaps for joining us. And we will see you, I'm sure, in the not too distant future somewhere when we can high five and shake hands and see you around.
Hopefully that's not too far away.
All right, mate.
Thanks, Raf. Thanks, guys.